So welcome everyone to today's webinar on the SAFE system, which has been brought to you by Project Edward and ARM. We're going to be talking today about the SAFE system knowledge exchange, which is a new learning gateway for road safety professionals. Its purpose is to develop a much more detailed understanding of the culture, principles and practice that make up the SAFE system delivery process. With me today are Adrian Walsh, Executive Director of RoadSafe, and Professor Nick Reed, founder of Reed Mobility, two people at the very heart of this project and experts in the SAFE system. In this session, we're going to focus on what the SAFE system is and what technology is required to deliver it. A short introductory presentation will be followed by a comprehensive Q&A session in which you'll all be able to quiz Adrian and Nick on any aspect of the SAFE system. And our aim is that we all come away from this session with a better understanding of this vital framework for delivering road safety improvements. The session's being recorded, so you'll be able to share that with any colleagues who weren't able to be here today. Everybody should be on mute. We'll keep everybody on mute during the presentation, but if you do have a question for Adrian or Nick, then please put it in the chat and we'll try to discuss as many of those as we can over the next hour. So Adrian, would you like to share your screen and then please start when you're ready?
Thank you all very much indeed, and thank you very much to Simon and to James for putting this webinar together, and a welcome to Nick, who has been a colleague for many years. We work together on a number of projects around the technology space and through our charity RoadSafe. Now, the idea of this exchange is really, as we have heard, to improve people's knowledge and to give access to examples, case studies from elsewhere outside the United Kingdom, and also we'll be working with Road Safety GB to focus on safe system applications within the United Kingdom. As many of you know, there are quite a lot of projects out there, a lot of operations out there now which have the safe system as their basis. National Highways has adopted it for its strategy. It's up and running in London, in Manchester, in Cambridgeshire and elsewhere. So the understanding of what a safe system is something that we all really need to grapple with. Last week was the ministerial conference, the fourth global ministerial conference on road safety, hosted by the Kingdom of Morocco, which brought together nearly 3,000 professionals from across the world. 88 ministers attended, including the UK's minister, Lillian Griebel, was there. And it focused on what the delivery of the global plan would look like over the next 5 years. Central to that delivery is an application of the SAFE system. Now, the way the global plan shows the SAFE system might be slightly different to the way that many of us have previously understood it. And I've shown this on the screen now. When we set up this exchange, we'll do it on this basis. And critical differences, perhaps, to what some people might think at the moment are the importance of multimodal transport and land use planning. I mean, if you think about it, that's absolutely central. If you want to make people safe on the roads, then one of the things you do is take them off the roads and put them in some other form of transport. So it's not just about vehicles and pedestrians and so on. The other elements of that you'll be more familiar with: safe roads and roadsides, road users, vehicles, and post-crash response. Now, everybody now understands that critical for delivery is technology, and the application of technology, particularly over the next 5 to 10 years before automation is normal. Maybe that's going to be 20 years away. The application of connected technology is critical. And I think the one thing that I always look at with the SAFE system is that it's dynamic. It's about movement. It's about velocity, which includes speed and direction, of course, and it's to avoid the effects of a collision, killing or seriously injuring somebody. So that's the outline of the safe system. What we need to now understand is what your requirements will be for this knowledge exchange. What do you need to do, and how can we put it into this knowledge exchange, which we are building in partnership with the Department for Transport, with Road Safety GB, and with the help from Agilysys, who are managing the software side of it. So questions, please, about the safe system to come in. But before we have that, perhaps Nick Reed would like to just say something from his point of view about what we mean about the safe system, to try and prompt questions to better understand what it is that you, our audience, really need to know to improve your knowledge. Nick.
Thank you, Adrian, and yeah, thanks to Simon and the team for putting on this webinar. Pleasure to be here. Gosh, I mean, there is so much to say. I think the starting point for me for the safe system is around the kind of sanctity of life. It starts from the principle that no one should be killed or seriously injured as a result of their use or engagement with the road transport system. And you know, like we've moved away from using the word accident, because accident gives a sense that that road crashes are inevitable and unforeseeable. We now think of them as crashes, and the safe system is about thinking about all of the ways that we can understand why crashes happen and what can we put in place to prevent those crashes from happening and to prevent from serious injury and fatalities in particular. It starts from accepting that people make mistakes, but we're not just only talking about drivers making mistakes. We're thinking about mistakes that might have been made by the people who design and maintain the roads, mistakes that might have been made by the people who design and build vehicles, people that set out the speed limits. Maybe there have been mistakes in the way they have introduced their vehicles or systems or whatever. And those can result in crashes. Now, when those crashes happen, we also recognize that humans are, there is a limit to which they can withstand the dynamic forces involved in a crash. And we want to make sure that those forces that are experienced by vehicle occupants or other road users are below those that cause death or serious injury. And by doing so, prevent those deaths, those serious injuries from occurring. Responsibility for achieving that is shared across many stakeholders, including drivers, including road users, riders, but also the people who design and maintain the roads, people who design and build vehicles, people who police our roads, people responsible for compliance and for enforcement on our roads. It's a proactive approach to road safety, and it's not a word I like to use. It's I think sometimes it can be misused, but I think proactive is really important here because it gives a sense that we're not waiting for crashes to happen and then trying to fix the causes that we observed. We're looking at where the risk exists, trying to address the risks on the roads before the crashes happen, and in doing so, I think that word proactive is very appropriate here, and it's systemic. So it's called the safe system. It means that elements that we need to act across multiple categories of action, as shown by Adrian's image here, and strengthen all of the ways in which collisions can be prevented. And I think I'd like to start with thinking about like a single vehicle crash that happens. In the past, it might have been looked at, oh, it's a loss of control incident, driver's mistake, and not much more thought about it. If we take a safe system approach to that crash, as Adrian alluded to earlier, we might start from why was that journey necessary by road vehicle in the first place? And if it was necessary, why was it that vehicle that was chosen for that journey? Why was it that route that was chosen? Did the driver perform vehicle checks, or when was the last time that vehicle had been checked for its kind of roadworthiness? What was the state of the road? What was the state of the training of the driver? So all of these different factors. What was the speed limit that applied, and is that a suitable one for that road at that time of day and under those conditions? So all of these different ways we can look at risk that exists and why that crash might have happened, that we can then use to apply interventions to prevent such crashes in future. So yeah, that's probably a good kick-off, Adrian, and very happy to take any questions following on from that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. Well, we'll get started. If you've got any questions for Nick or Adrian, or anything that you'd like to know about the SAFE system, put them in the chat now and we'll monitor those. We've got some discussion points to get started. And Adrian, perhaps if I can come to you first. A lot of the people on the call will be very familiar with traditional road safety methods. A lot of us have been involved in road safety for many years. So how does the SAFE system approach differ from traditional road safety methods? How do we need to change what we've done in the past for us to create initiatives that comply with the SAFE system?
I think the real point about this is we've gone away from the thinking of what used to be called blaming the victim. You always look for blame, and you try and put the blame on a sort of single source, saying, oh, the young driver was going too fast. Now, the point about the SAFE system, you ask the first question is, was the young driver in a position where they were they were really thinking about and managing their journey well? That sort of question. Has the young driver got a car that is capable of crashing? Was the young driver on a road which was essentially at least a 3-star, if not better, road? You start asking those sorts of questions. What was the journey really about? And you look at other factors all the way, and you stop just looking at the fundamental basics. We always said, oh, he was going too fast. It's much, much more serious a review than that. And the reason for that is that it's a complex business, mobility. And we all need it in our modern society. We all look for it. We all think that it should be there, but it's highly complex. So trying to simplify it is really unreasonable. And that's the difference. Now, what the Swedish people are now talking about, and after all, they're leaders in this, is that one of the things about the SAFE system is it motivates, I quote now from their latest document, it motivates those who design and maintain the roads, manufacture vehicles, and administer safety programs to share responsibility for safety with the road users, so that when a crash occurs, remedies are sought throughout the system rather than solely blaming the driver or other road users. That's one of the fundamental principles of it, this concept of sharing responsibility. Now, that's a new concept, not easy to grapple with, but I think that is one of the big, big differences.
And Simon, if I were to add one thing to that, it would be around, as we increase the levels of technology in the vehicles and within the infrastructure, we get more data that helps us to understand the incidents that are occurring and the causes of them, and understand the precursors to those incidents as well. So whether that's from cameras or telematic systems or driver assistance systems, the data that is available is helping us to understand the road safety challenges we face in more detail and with greater clarity than we have been able to previously.
Are you able to dig into that a little bit more? One of the points we've made a note of was how does the SAFE system incorporate new technologies, and what data comes from that technology, and how do you then analyze that data to see whether the SAFE system is effective or what improvements need to be made?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of having that better understanding of the incidents that are occurring. I think it's just, the increased statistical power through having that better data and more kind of granularity of our understanding as to why those crashes are happening. So being able to go into more depth on stats 19, the contributory factors to collisions, that help us understand what measures need to be put in place to prevent those collisions from happening. And then in terms of, it's a bit of a frustration in some ways, because telematics data could be a fantastic resource for us in the road safety community to help understand why crashes are happening, and sometimes it's hard to access that data and build that picture, and something it's for good reasons around privacy and cyber security and whatever else. But it would be lovely to have greater access to that data. And I think as we move towards the automation of our roads, and we start to see vehicles using the roads that don't have drivers, having that transparency over why crashes are happening that involve such vehicles will be absolutely essential.
Thanks. We've got a lot of people, representatives on from Safe Roads partnerships and local road safety practitioners around. So you might both want to have a go at this one. We've got a number of questions coming in, which I'll come to after this point. But perhaps, Adrian, if I can come to you first, because we've got a lot of local road safety practitioners on, they'll be familiar with, for instance, Vision Zero. How does Vision Zero and Safe System come together? Are there differences? Do they support each other? How does that work?
There's often confusion here. Vision Zero is the ultimate. Safe System is the mechanism of achieving Vision Zero in simple terms. Now, Vision Zero, the Swedish concept of Vision Zero was actually not that there should be no death or injury, but you should be able to design a system where death and injury should not occur. It's a slightly different thing. We have a target of zero very often, but the vision is slightly different. But the safe system is the mechanism of achieving that. And if you want a target where there's going to be no death and serious injury, you're only going to achieve it by applying the safe system. There are many bits of the safe system which are now very advanced. For example, modern vehicle design. You have a number of vehicle manufacturers who have a design view that nobody should be killed or seriously injured in one of their vehicles. Honda has now moved into that position, as well as Volvo, which is more traditional. So the huge amount of design is going into the system in parts of it, but it's not a total design yet. And it can't be, because different people are responsible for different bits of the system. And of course, it's a shared responsibility. It's critical to understand how that can be achieved.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think that, in terms of having a target, zero is the only ethical target that can be considered acceptable. I'm sure many on the call will have seen that Australian video where they ask someone what would be an acceptable number, and then they send out that number of people, and it includes members of that person's family, and then he realizes, has that penny drop moment where he recognizes that zero is the only acceptable number. Every fatality is someone's son, daughter, mother, father, brother, sister, and so, yeah, I think that has to be the starting point as the ambition. We realize it's a challenging one, but that's the challenge we set ourselves.
And one of the things about the concept is that nobody is saying a crash should not occur. What we're saying is that the result of a crash should not be death or serious injury. That's a different thing. And the whole design system of a car it's designed to withstand the crash, and it's designed to protect those people involved in the crash. The more advanced ones protect the pedestrian as well, but the most of the effort at the moment is about the people inside the car. So it's a slightly understanding that it's not about no crashes, but it's about providing the ability to avoid death and serious injury. That is a critical factor when you're trying to understand this.
And to follow on from that, there's a term used a lot in workplace health and safety, which is zero harm, but that's quite contentious applied to road safety, I think. What's your view on that term? It's one I've heard bandied about a few times.
Well, it's a good term, and because it applies to it means actually that if an injury occurs, it should be properly investigated so that you can put in place systems to avoid that from happening again. That's the concept behind zero harm. And the companies that use it, there are many that use it, and that number is growing hugely across the world. One of the things that happened in this last 5 years of the global plan is the realization that particularly the private sector can contribute massively to the ambitions of the global plan. And this, of course, is true in Britain as well. And there are many companies that have a very high standard of management. They investigate any injury. They often also investigate where there's no injury occurred, but where there has been transgression. For example, many companies investigate any speeding events that they pick up in their telematics systems. That's all part of the zero harm concept. I mean, you, Simon, of course, understand that, but I think our wider audience needs to understand that as well.
Excellent, thanks. Now I'll come to a couple of the questions that we've had in now. Actually, Adrian, James have just mentioned that he hopes you might be able to turn your camera on now. So if you want to just try that.
I still have a blocker on it that says video sharing is disabled by the administrator. So I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Apologies for that then. Right. So Nick, if I can come to you with a couple of these questions, because the theme for today was partly around what technology you need to deliver the safe system. And there's a couple of points come in where that technology clearly exists to prevent some of the key causes of crashes. The first one that was mentioned was there's obviously technology available to stop mobile phone interaction in the vehicle, and another one came in shortly after that saying, and obviously we've got technology to limit speed. So there's technology there. How easy is that to implement? Why isn't it implemented? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's both very good questions. It comes down to political will and kind of corporate acceptance of risk. It's difficult to answer why a company would choose not to adopt that. But I would say we're talking about a safe system, and the system has to be accommodating to those who have chosen not to do that. And so we need to look at other ways to help ensure that any incidents that do occur are below that severity, which result in death and serious injury. So it is frustrating, but we have to take it from a systemic perspective and say, okay, if that avenue is not open to us, what are the other avenues we need to explore that might be more productive, that might be more advantageous in terms of our overall aim to eliminate death and serious injury from the road transport system.
Thank you. Possibly another one for you as well. Question that's come in is, do you think the vehicle manufacturers are aligned with the safe system, and how do we get them on board to support national and local work if they're not supporting that already?
I mean, the manufacturers have been making huge strides forward. A lot of it driven by the Euro NCAP approach to making sure their vehicles achieve the highest ratings in terms of safety. Now, and I think a good thing that's happened over the last 10 years or so is that shift to not only occupant protection, but also other road user protection. So making sure that a 5-star car also helps to prevent injuries to other road users as well. And not just about crash protection, but avoiding crashes in the first place. I think that that's an important element. So in that regard, they're aligned to the safe system. I think you could also challenge the manufacturers around the growth in size and mass of the sort of typical vehicles. There's been an average trend for vehicles to grow slightly larger, slightly heavier year on year, which adds protection to occupants of those vehicles, but creates more energy in collisions with other road users. So in that sense, there's a challenge there around the overall distribution of injuries that occur as a result of crashes. But for the most part, yeah, the manufacturers have done a huge amount in terms of technology and crashworthiness that has improved road safety.
And that's improving quite significantly at the moment as well, isn't it? Obviously, the ADAS technology available on cars is pretty much, all available on most of the cars now. Most of them achieve a 5-star rating. The van Euro NCAP ratings have been in place for a few years now, and the van manufacturers are really starting to take it seriously as well now. And then we've got truck Euro NCAP ratings as well, so they do also. It does seem to be having an effect, doesn't it? And they're taking it more seriously as each year goes past.
Yes, however, I mean, I would imagine most people on the call know that the annual reductions in casualties haven't been achieved as they were, up until about the early 2000s, that we have had this plateau. And I think some of that is to do with we've had the benefits of technology improving road safety, but humans are funny creatures and they start to take advantage of the safety features that exist within vehicles. So if my vehicle is keeping me within the lane, suddenly perhaps I'm not paying attention as much to the road layout. Suddenly I'm maybe starting to engage with other technologies that we've talked about with smartphones and so on, that result in not getting the level of safety benefit which we might have anticipated through the introduction of that technology. So it's a game. It's a whack-a-mole, but it's a game with very, very serious consequences that we have to be mindful of.
Excellent. Adrian, did you have any comments
Yeah,
on the vehicle side?
I think if you look at the history of safety development, the two big step changes were the introduction of the 3-point seatbelt, which of course is standard in UK. Whether everybody wears it or not is a separate question, but it's quite difficult not to with a seatbelt reminder in a car. You've got to be quite deliberate not doing it, not to wear it. But that's one of the big things that really saved lives. In the developing world, there are still cars being manufactured which don't have seatbelts front and rear. I mean, it's appalling, but that is changing and changing rapidly. But in Britain, that's one of the big things, or in Europe, that's one of the big things. The second, of course, was stability control, and that reduced the number of collisions by something like 40% on side impact. I mean, phenomenal technologies, both of them, and they came out of or invented by the automobile industry, and that industry, particularly tier one, the component manufacturers, that evolution and development is still continuing apace, and we will see more of it. But we've had the big wins. Those were the two big wins. Everything else will be incremental, as Nick was saying. And then, of course, humans, well, take the seatbelt. It's a very good thing, but if people choose not to wear it, how on earth can they be protected? So there is still a role to educate people and to encourage them to do that kind of thing. And we always have a bit of enforcement necessary to make this happen. Ian Cameron, who wrote one of the big academic tomes on the safe system and its introduction for the International Transport Forum, he incidentally chairs the Prince Michael Award's judging committee, and he works out of Western Australia. I mean, he will tell you that you've got to remember a safe system only works if you have 100% compliance. In reality, we have about a 20 or 30% of people who choose not to comply. So they put themselves outside the system. So enforcement is still very important to try and bring them back into the system.
Thank you. We've got another question from Margaret, which is the Safe System Exchange website live now? I think
Not yet.
it's not, because it's still in development, but perhaps you could cover, because you wanted to take some of the learnings from today, didn't you, and what people were questioning to help develop the content. So you just want to talk a little bit about that?
That's exactly it. The purpose of today is to understand your needs, what the audience really want to know. We can put lots of stuff on it which we think people might be interested in knowing, but if you don't tell us what you need to know, then we're not going to be able to populate this properly. But it's not yet live. It's due to go live after Easter, and at the moment we're populating it with things we think people might need, and it will work hand in glove with the work that Road Safety GB is doing through that element of the knowledge centre as well.
Fantastic. I'm not sure this is a question, but it might be more of a discussion point. With reference to the recent PACS report, inquests and prevention of future death reports provide opportunities to learn and implement improvements, but police collision reporting to coroners rarely highlights measures that could have been taken to prevent such collisions. Independent representatives of road user groups need to be able to formally be interested persons at inquests. Does anybody have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so I wrote that report, so
excellent.
very happy to respond on that one. I mean, I think the report highlights how there is much more that could be learnt from the inquest process. And I think going back to that original point I made about deaths being they are road deaths being preventable and avoidable, and so many more of the fatal crashes we see on the network should have these prevention of future deaths reports associated with them. So these are the reports that the coroner produces and sends to those that they think are able, individuals or organizations they think are able to act to prevent such incidents happening in future. So one of the recommendations was firstly around better guidance to coroners and safe system training around making sure that the coroners understand all of those different ways. So I talked about that single vehicle crash earlier, all of the different ways that such an incident could have been prevented, so that they can then think about to whom they would then send those prevention of future deaths reports. But then I think there's a lot more that could be done around collating those the causes and the respondents to the prevention of future deaths reports, so that we start to see trends and hopefully reducing trends in the causes of those crashes. And that's exactly the sort of activity that we might expect from a road safety investigation branch were one to exist. We don't have one of those. Hope we will do in future. But yeah, having that kind of coordination of information resulting from those inquests would be a great step forward.
And I imagine a lot of those instances would involve vulnerable road users. So one of the questions we received was around how the safe system approach addresses the safety needs of vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, of course, in terms of infrastructure design, one of the easiest ways of protecting the vulnerable road users is not to have mixed traffic conditions. Is why, fundamentally, why cyclists, horse riders, and pedestrians are not allowed on motorways. If you think about it, that's we just accept it as normal, but there's some thought behind it. In urban areas where you get these conflicts, then you achieve it by good traffic management. You either segregate and not have zones where you don't have cars and vehicles, or you slow the traffic down to a speed where a collision is unlikely to kill one of the or seriously injure one of the vulnerable road users. The whole purpose of the 20-mile-an-hour concept is to do precisely that, and that is the application of the safe system, if you think about it. If I just go back to the Pact's report and its recommendations, one of the stories we'll be featuring on this exchange is the story of what Scotland is currently doing. Scotland is adopting the safe system wholesale. They're running a training program at the moment, which includes training for coroners and everybody else you would imagine investigating the collision and so on. It's a huge multi-million-pound program to apply the safe system across Scotland. It's started, it's well underway, and it's well funded. So it's going to be a case study well worth looking at.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question that's come in, which I guess kind of relates to road user engagement with this and compliance. A road that I use on my daily commute to Cardiff has an average speed of 48 miles an hour within a 50-mile-an-hour zone. So good compliance, it would appear. Yet the council are again lowering the speed limit using average speed cameras rather than dealing with the exceptions who have been recorded at 100 miles an hour plus. Does the panel feel that is fair? Appreciate you might not be familiar with that road.
Good question, and it's hard to know without knowing the details of that route and the traffic that uses it. And so, as you know, Simon, I had 3 years with National Highways as Chief Road Safety Advisor, and a lot of the challenges we faced around pushing National Highways towards their ambition of elimination of death and serious injury is when you want to introduce a safety measure, its benefits are often lost in the economic calculations associated with reduction of speeds. You may reduce average speed on a road by 5 miles per hour, say, by introducing a lower speed limit, and then you multiply that up in terms of lost productive time for everyone using that road against the safety benefit that you achieve, and it's then very hard to introduce that measure purely on an economic basis. So sometimes you have to look beyond that, and I think it's without knowing the detail, it sounds like the council in Cardiff has taken a decision here to introduce a measure that they feel will improve safety on that route, and I would imagine that they are just as concerned about the extreme speeders as they are about the existing compliance or people who are thereabouts. So yeah, it would have to be the council obviously come to that decision for a particular reason. I don't know exactly what that is, but we know that speed and energy and mass are all things that result in greater severity of injury when it comes to collisions. So I think that what they're doing is likely to improve safety.
Yeah,
I think that the cursory mention of a average speed camera brings us back to the importance of applied technology. There is absolutely no doubt that average speed cameras have been hugely significant in reducing death and serious injury on our roads because a compliant person realizes they're being watched and goes at the correct speed, and everybody behind them stays at that speed. So they have time and time again where they've been put in, they have produced significant changes in behavior which have resulted in a much safer system. So they're a great piece of technology, and very little do people end up being punished because they are so effective. The speed awareness course, which is tied in with their use, has been highly successful as well in raising awareness and understanding. So that whole package of the average speed camera has been a success story.
So to follow on from that, Adrian, what how important is road user compliance if the safe system is to work, and what strategies are needed to communicate what the safe system is to road users and ensure that all stakeholders, I guess, in the safe system, road users, designers, vehicle manufacturers, we all understand our shared responsibility, and as road users we understand what our responsibility is within the safe system.
I think if you look at 20-mile-an-hour limits as an example of that, which are now come in by popular request in towns and villages, there has been a huge change in opinion. People realise now that there is a link between speed and casualties. Of course, individuals don't like it affecting them. That's how people behave, but it's that kind of thing has changed. Much more in-car information is available. ISA is a classic game changer in this. Speed assistance systems in cars again have been great game changers. The majority of people know perfectly well you need to wear a seatbelt. You shouldn't be drinking and driving. It's outliers that break the law. It's not the mass. Most people are highly compliant, and that's as a result of public education. The Think campaign has probably been the greatest success story in public education since the programs designed to stop people from smoking. So there's been a lot that's gone on over the last 20 years that has changed behavior significantly. But there are the outliers, as I mentioned earlier, those people who choose not to be compliant. And it's probably all of us some of the time.
Excellent, thank you. And actually, that's a good point just to put a plug in for our Project Edward podcast, which James publishes each week, which is entitled My Role in the Safe System. And our guest this week is Saul Jevons from the TransSafe Network. Next week is Saeed Dardar, fresh from the ministerial conference in Morocco that Adrian was mentioning earlier. So you can listen to those on the Project Edward website, and plenty of interesting discussions about different people and their roles in the safe system.
And what we'll be doing is integrating those into this knowledge exchange once we get going as well. It'll all be one platform where you can join all these things together.
Fantastic. Someone's asked how can we have the research and development in place to address the serious weaknesses within the ancient TSRGD regulations? Is that something you want to come on, Adrian?
I'm not an expert at that. I don't know if Nick can comment on that at all.
I mean, yes, it's a great question. I know Derek is very passionate about this topic. What I would say is, and I saw there was a question as well about construction and use regulations as well. The regulations, standards, they're always going to be lagging behind. These things take time, so we have to do the best we can within the frameworks we have, and that's part of safe system. Going back to where I started, the layers of this Swiss cheese model. If we think the regulations have some holes in them, we need to put in other layers of the Swiss cheese so that collision doesn't end up happening. So yeah, it's frustrating where there is shortcomings or perceived shortcomings in regulations, whether it's TSRGD or DMRB or GG104 or vehicle design or the laws that we have that govern our road use today. But we have to work with them as they are. We have to work to try to change them as well, but also do what we can across the system to prevent the crashes from happening.
Next question is, there's been a lot of discussion around technology, which is great as long as it's the right type of technology. And obviously, today's theme was technology, but there is another factor that's often missed, which is driver health and well-being, and also mental health as well, I would suggest as well, because there's a lot of drivers out there not concentrating fully because not necessarily because they're on the phone or they're falling asleep or whatever, but just because their mind's elsewhere. Where does that particular challenge fit in the safe system?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. It's very important. That's my background is in psychology and driver behavior and human factors. So certainly, yes, distraction, fatigue, concentration, all potentially contributing to the crashes that happen on our network. What we see with the general safety regulation is systems within the vehicle that start to detect some of that inattention, whether it's through fatigue or distraction, and can alert the driver and help the driver to maintain their attention. And ultimately, as more and more of these automation systems come in, we'll be able to do more to bring the vehicle to a safe stop should the vehicle be, through a medical or whatever reason, not paying suitable attention, we'll be able to control the vehicle safely. So, yeah, technology doing more to detect and protect drivers and other road users in the result of drivers not being fully attentive. So, again, yeah, that's thinking about what are the parts of the safe system that can help to support the individual drivers who might have a particular issue around attention or concentration or medical situation.
Excellent. Adrian, I'll pass this one to you then. London prevents vehicles over 12 tonnes entering central London unless fitted with the progressive safe system. Yeah. And the question is, why are policies like this dealt with on a local level rather than nationally?
Well, actually, it's quite interesting that London leads the way in the world on this, and it led the way with the introduction of fours, because it realised very early on, when the Jubilee Line, not the Jubilee Line Crossrail was being developed, that trucks posed a real risk to other vulnerable road users, yet they were essential for the economy to move the spoil. And so they introduced a series of measures, this is the latest one, to make it safer for cyclists. That's being adopted in Europe. It's being adopted in other countries in the world as well. So yes, London has led the way, others are following. So, it's great. That's leadership. And it's one of the panels at the global conference was a panel of mayors across the world. There were 500 mayors there. And London was represented, and it shows that you can move safety on very effectively in a city faster than you can in a country, because mayors have supreme power over everything, particularly this business of design and modal shift. So mayors are doing this. London is a classic example of good practice in that area. Absolutely, yes.
Got another question for you on the Safe Systems Exchange itself, Adrian, which will it allow real-time communication between all the users and allow them, for instance, to join together for discussion groups and to help them provide content and information?
This is the first of those events. So thank you. But it's absolutely critical we join together on this and work together, and ARM and Project Edward will be an important part of it. So yes.
So we can there'll be more events like this. There's another webinar in this series which I'll talk about at the end, but there'll be other discussion groups going forward that allow everybody to sort of take part and contribute as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea of it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, next question. In line with reviewing fatal collisions locally through a safe system lens, while we wait for a national investigation branch, could you suggest any organisation who could support with the vehicle technology area? At a local level, we are struggling to find someone with in-depth expertise. Who wants to take that one?
That's a good question. I think when it comes to understanding the implications of technology from a road safety perspective, I would look to the likes of Thatcham and possibly TRL as being organisations that have that in-depth knowledge. Certainly Thatcham through all of their NCAP testing and support for the development of those regulations, and then TRL, Transport Research Laboratory, who did a lot of the work supporting the development of the general safety regulation. So understanding all of the different technologies that have gone into those requirements of new vehicles sold in Europe today. So yeah, certainly those are probably the two I would look at for support on vehicle technology insights.
Yeah. I think the next one sounds up your street, Adrian, because you've got the ADAS hub as well. So it's a comment. Most of the cause of most crashes is the driver, regardless of vehicle ADAS brackets, sometimes because of it. And I guess the question is, should we be putting more weight behind safer driving or advanced driving skills? What would that be a small but important step towards safer roads?
I think to start with the premise of the driver being responsible is failing to understand the application of the safe system. Drivers make mistakes. It's the whole point about the safe system is to minimize the effect of that mistake. And that's what other road users make mistakes as well. It's not just the drivers. And the people who design the roads and so on make mistakes, as Nick pointed out at the beginning. So ADAS helps. Of course it does, because it overcomes that weakness that the driver might have of not spotting the car stopping in collision avoidance systems do precisely that. So does that answer the question? I'm not sure it does,
Yes,
but I'm just pointing out that I think that it's a failure to understand the safe system if you think that the driver is at fault all the time.
Yes, no, yes, no, I think you've answered that. Nick, I might come to you with this one. A local transport campaigner. I don't know where the locality is, but I'm a local transport campaigner, very frustrated about the lack of proactive adoption of the safe system process locally. A one-way seafront route has echelon car parking with cars reversing out into cars and cyclists. I'm being told that because in 12 years there have only been 2 cyclists injured, this is okay. The area has been completely redesigned, but with the same highways layout. I'm told slow speeds make this okay. What are your thoughts on that? So
yeah, I grew up in a seaside town with echelon parking along the seafront, and yeah, very similar layout to what's been described here. And that point about there only being 2 cyclists injured reminds me of the anecdote or the example of you don't decide where to put a bridge by looking at the number of people swimming across the river. So yeah, maybe there would be a lot more cycling if there were safer infrastructure that people could use. So yeah, I mean, share the frustrations. I think the slower speeds make sense. I think what Adrian mentioned earlier about how the introduction of slower speed limits, 20 miles per hour, is welcomed typically at a local level. People campaign for it. And I think there is more traction that people can get these days with local groups pushing for specific measures that are seen to improve safety. And I think it's a question of getting the right representation and then getting the right contact within the road authority, usually within the council, that can make a change. And there might be an opportunity for things to be done differently. But again, it's frustrating. And if you don't get the change you want in terms of the infrastructure, then we have to think about other elements of the safe system to help prevent collisions from happening.
Someone else saying, I cycle locally and the infrastructure put in place is poorly designed and maintained. But I guess the answer to that is what we're trying to do here, isn't it? Which is to educate people and provide examples of good practice and how to apply the safe system so that in future that infrastructure is well designed.
I think, Simon, just I guess a note of caution, really. There is always a risk that in talking about it at a systemic level, there's the opportunity for someone to say, oh, well, it's not my problem, it's someone else's. And that's not what the safe system is about. It's about thinking about all of the ways in which risk can be reduced and acting where you can to make those changes. So yeah, I guess just a word of caution really, that we shouldn't mistreat the system by thinking about, just because there are other elements that could improve, we don't have to worry about those for which we have responsibility.
No, good point. There's another vehicle safety related point here. TfL's direct vision standard is evidencing a 62% reduction in road deaths and injuries post implementation. Should that be implemented nationally in line with the decade of action?
Yeah, I think I've answered that already. It is being implemented internationally. London is leading the way. Europe is adopting the regulations. They're being adopted in other places across the world as well. The vehicle manufacturers welcome it, and people like Scania and so on are very happy to quickly adjust their designs to suit this. Yeah, I mean it is moving around the world pretty rapidly. So it's going to be standard across Europe. I don't quite know where we are with regulations across Britain yet, but it's well on the way.
Excellent. We're coming up to the hour now, so I want to wrap up now, but give you both the chance to put forward any final comments something that you feel we might have missed in today's discussion that you want to cover before we go.
I think for me, Simon, there's a point that someone has made is echoing what the one I would like to make, is around technology helping, but not necessarily being a silver bullet. Nick has mentioned about phantom braking, which can result in front rear collisions. We are seeing more and more automated driving happening, and that should improve road safety, and by law, according to the Automated Vehicles Act, it will have to improve road safety, but it's not going to be perfect. And so we need to be monitoring the collisions that remain and working out how we can prevent those, applying all of the same safe system principles. It will always be a work in progress, but by thinking about all of the different ways we can prevent risk, we can help to reduce the level of death and serious injury, which is unacceptable today.
Brilliant. Adrian?
I think 2 points I would like to make is to thank Nick enormously for adding a huge amount of wisdom to this discussion. And thank you, Nick, and thank you all of you for putting it together, and thank people for the questions. But it's about shared responsibility. It's very clear that the responsibility needs to be shared across the piece by the people who design the roads, with the people who design the vehicles, and the people who actually operate the systems itself. And the system includes the movement of the vehicle. Cyclists have as much responsibility, and do pedestrians, as do drivers. It's shared.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adrian. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar is one of a pair, and the second one will be in a month's time, exactly 4 weeks time from now, on Wednesday, the 26th of March at 11 o'clock, where Adrian will be joined by Dr. Susie Charman, Executive Director of the Road Safety Foundation. And that session is going to focus on actually how we apply the SAFE system in the UK. So if you'd like to join in that discussion as well, there's more details on the homepage of the Project Edward website, projectedward.org. There's a big banner where you can go and register for that one. So thank you very much, Adrian and Nick. Thank you very, very much for participating in today's discussion. And I hope you've all, everyone on the call today has found that useful and informative. And we will be part of the comms process once the Knowledge Hub is live. We'll be part of that, helping to communicate with everybody to make sure they know it's available. So thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you all very soon.